Welcome back here today on the beautiful campus of Florida Panhandle Technical College. Another in our series of Meet the Candidates. I know we've been saying all year long that this is not a political cycle as it pertains to county, state, or federal positions. However, the city of Chipley is having one of their city elections. Our guest today is Tracy Andrews, currently running for Ward 3 in Chipley representative or council member. When we come back, we're going to talk to Tracy a little bit about just that. We're going to talk about Chipley. Chipley makes up a very small part of Washington County, the county in which we find ourselves. However, it is the county seat, and there's a lot that goes along with that. From the community redevelopment aspect to the number of schools and all sorts of other responsibilities as well as duties that go along with being a part of that hierarchy in the city. We look forward to this series. We'll have Mayor Lee Dale Kennedy, currently the incumbent in that position, hopefully will be appearing as well. And you'll have that opportunity to become an informed voter. You know, so often we encourage you to get out and vote. How many times do people say, be engaged, get out and vote? Shame on you if you vote and you're not informed, you're not educated. It's the non-educated voters who get out there and just vote for whoever somebody else tells them to vote for, which are making some of our problems. Know who you're voting for, know the candidates. Hopefully this series allows you to do just that, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Tracy Andrews, recently declared as a candidate for Ward 3 City Council member in Chipley, Florida. First of all, I know that you're busy in normal life. Certainly you're busy with the campaign, so thanks for taking the time today.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
You are running for the City Council, Ward 3 in Chipley, Florida. Let's start at the beginning. Chipley is a relatively small town. It's in a very large rural county. So there's lots of permutations that go along with all that, and we'll talk about that as we go. Let's start with the nuts and bolts. How many representatives does the city of Chipley have?
Representatives, as far as the city council, in reference, there's actually Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
And Ward 1 is going to be Karen Rustin. Ward 2 is Tommy Sasser. Ward 3 is the position in which I'm running for. And then Ward 4 is going to be Brett Butler. And we have an at-large position as well with Mr. Reed, Ellis Reed.
So does Chipley vote single-member district, or does the entire city vote for each position?
The entire city will have the opportunity on August the 1st to vote for Ward 3's position.
Okay. 2 and 3 were the seats that came up for election this cycle. Tommy Sasser does not have an opponent.
That's correct.
So he's just going to breeze right back into office. How long are those terms of office for the Chipley City Council?
Those terms are for 2 years.
Okay. You know, state representative and our even our U.S. representative, Steve Sutherland, and now Neil Dunn, those are 2-year positions. It seems like it's tough to get out of that campaign mode, especially in those higher offices when you represent a very large area. You get elected, and then by the time you're sworn in, you literally have 22 months, and it seems like these politicians are constantly in that campaign mode. One could argue that it sort of makes you ineffective because you are always campaigning. I would like to think on a small city scale, however, that it's not necessarily like that. As a matter of fact, what I really like about the Chipley elections is that the city only allows a window of opportunity to campaign. How often do you hear people complain about, especially on a county-wide basis, the signs and the litter and all of the pollution that goes along with it? I understand that the city only allows you to put out signs within a certain window of opportunity prior to the election. What is that window?
That window is a very small window, and actually you qualify for this year. The last qualifying date was June the 9th. And so the election itself is August the 1st. So after June the 9th, then you're able to begin your campaigning with your signage and literature mailed out. So it's a short window, but you have to be out there.
7 weeks, roughly. A little bit better than 7 weeks. That's good. I would dare say that anyone, this is free advice, anyone who wants to run for office, anyone who wants to keep their current elected office, and anyone who wants to campaign once again to stay as that incumbent, should be constantly, every single day, working towards that by doing the right thing for your constituents, not waiting until that month or two before your election to go out there and campaign. Therefore, we always look at people as being community-minded, community-spirited, engaged in that community. Let's talk a little bit about Tracy Andrews to start with. Give us a little thumbnail sketch about you, your history, and maybe the reasons you want to run for this office.
I can, sir. I'm born and raised here in Chipley, Florida, and I'm a 1986 graduate, Chipley High School, continued my education on to Chipola Junior College, received an AA degree there in business administration, and then Florida A&M University with a Bachelor's of Science in Computer Information Systems. Was able to come back to Chipley, has been employed with Gulf Power Company for 25 plus years, and have always been engaged here within the community. Always had that spirit of volunteerism, I call it, where if I'm here, I want to be engaged. I want to be involved with what happens within the community of which I live. And so I've taken on many roles with the city of Chipley. First of all, Parks and Recreation. So working under the leadership of Miss Marion Lee and Linda Kane when they were council ladies there. Had the opportunity to be a part of some things that happened at Gilmore's Park as well as Shivers Park. And so the engagement has been continual. Worked on the Code Enforcement Board, currently serve now as the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So my heart and compassion for serving is there. I think it's a great thing to be able to give of yourself, to this great community. Many places I could be, I guess, or live, but I rather live here in Chipley. My family's here, and I find value living here in this small community.
Now, is the city council seat in Chipley a paid position?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and what's the stipend, roughly the stipend for that?
I didn't ask because that's not important to me.
Okay.
But I could tell you from years ago, I've heard that it was $300 or so, but that's not important to me. My position is I want to serve.
Yeah. Well, I would dare say it would be important to the voters.
Okay.
Because obviously it's their tax money going to that. Let me ask you another question now. There's 5 members. There are 4 wards and 1 at large. Again, not single member districts. You said the entire city votes for each of those.
That's correct.
How is the mayor position determined?
The mayor's position, from my understanding of how it all works, from the council itself, the citizens don't actually vote for the mayor. Once you have your 5-member panel for your city council, the council itself makes the recommendation from the board, within the board, who that mayor would be for that particular year.
So those 5 members decide
Yes.
amongst themselves, basically.
That is correct.
Who will have that position. So it's either... sometimes it's, those kind of positions are be careful what you ask for.
Yes.
Sometimes it'll be the guy that didn't make it to the meeting and has no way to defend himself becomes the mayor. Other times just a popularity contest. What is the difference between any sitting city council person and the mayor sitting in that mayor's seat? What are the fundamental differences between those two positions? There
are some specific differences because the mayor, from my understanding, he represents the city of Chipley, but he works hand in hand with the city administrator. So everyone have specific roles or duties, or they serve as liaison for different areas of the actual function of the city council. But the mayor has a more hands-on, I would say. I have a more stronger voice as some concerns as it pertains to the city of Chipley.
Well, yeah, I would think just as in any city, that mayoral seat, that's the face of the city.
Yes.
That's the person who typically is going to represent the city in any sorts of regional conventions or trade shows or even governmental functions.
That is correct.
That person would be that face of the city. And also, if Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure are followed, and I presume that they are, the mayor would not be able to make a motion, nor would they vote unless there was a tie. You think that's not your understanding?
That is correct. That is my understanding.
Okay. 3,500 roughly residents in Chipley, Florida. Okay. Do you know how many registered voters there are of that 3,500?
Well, right now I am working on a revised list. I had a list. Because there's roughly, according to the census for 2010, around 3,605. Okay. That was the population here for the city of Chipley. But I am getting in touch with our Supervisor of Elections office to get a finalized list, because I think there were some discrepancies, perhaps just making sure that we had city citizens registered for the city, and some that were not annexed were a part of a list. Something with 911 that took place, but I'm still waiting to get a revised list of that.
So no idea of how many people voted in the last election, for instance?
No, sir.
Okay. Chipley proper, the city of Chipley, the incorporated municipal area that is Chipley, 80% of the folks that live in the city limits have a high school diploma or an equivalency. That's pretty strong.
That's very strong.
That is greater than the state average, but only 10% have a bachelor degree or anything higher. That's only an observation. That's not a question. But it does lead me to believe that even though the bulk of our people leave Chipley every day to go to work, that they're not going to school. They're going to work, and that perhaps some of our best minds end up leaving due to lack of jobs. Would you subscribe to that theory?
Yes, and that's something that I believe strongly that the Economic Development Council is working on, economic development, economic growth here for the city of Chipley. And so what can we do to attract in the city?
There are 8 schools in Washington County. Chipley has 5 of them within its city limits. Does that add a degree of difficulty? Does that add some more complexity to the functions of the city, being that you have 5 of those schools in the city? Understanding, of course, that those are under the umbrella of the school district, which is separate from the city, but nonetheless, law enforcement and other aspects of everyday life in the city. How does that affect the city and the city's budget?
I think it's healthy to have options, and so I'm very happy that we have 5 leading schools here in the city limits of Chipley. Yes, it would impact law enforcement because based on where regionally these schools are located, we normally would have a presence there for those particular schools. But I think that with the growing population and the needs of the city growing, that we would have to just do better to increase our resources. And so it also gives a lending hand to job creation. Because of the needs, there are also needs for more jobs. And so hopefully the funding will be where we're able to keep up with that growing industry or growing area within our city.
You mentioned economic development.
Yes.
Huge topic.
Huge.
I think sometimes that we live in Groundhog Day. It seems like every year we just start over again. And in the 12 years I've been here, I haven't seen anything appreciably happen. I don't know that we can hang our hat on the 4 lanes necessarily. That's not us doing that.
No.
However, we have enjoyed a brand new courthouse that the 14th Judicial Circuit gave to us.
Yes.
And we've got a brand new Kate Smith Elementary School. Now, both of those projects, $9.2 million in the case of the courthouse, huge opportunity for Chipley. First of all, some people still fighting that, no, the county seat should be in Vernon fight because we all know the history that at one time it was in Vernon. By design, typically a county seat is in the geographical center of a county if possible. Some still argue that that's Vernon. Also back in those days, Washington County extended all the way to the Gulf of Mexico, which obviously added another wrinkle. But nonetheless, talk a little bit about that $9.2 million courthouse, the opportunity that it affords Washington County. We have become sort of a unique situation. We're the only county courthouse in Chipley that's been funded by the state in anyone's recent history. Talk a little bit about how that impacts Chipley as a city.
Well, I believe that our county commissioners that were currently in place during that time of negotiating and finding and searching and finding and talking with those over in Tallahassee played an instrumental part in us being able to have that funded the way that it was funded. How it impacts us was the fact that we do have a newer building, that will last us hopefully for many years, that it also it will allow us room for growth as well. And so potentially they didn't build they built a facility that will allow us to do more. And so I believe overall economically it's going to help us out with also job creation.
One thing that we do in addition to inviting candidates for all of these various positions on the show while they are running is that we invite you back for follow-ups once you're in office. This next week, we're looking at Neil Dunn coming in for an interview. He came
Great.
during his candidacy. We've got Matt Gaetz that we're trying to schedule right now. Jimmy Petronas, recently named the Chief Financial Officer of Florida.
Yes.
Saw him this weekend down in Lynn Haven. He's going to be making a trip up here. So some of these questions will be also on the test, if you will, when you come back following your being in office, because we certainly understand that as a candidate, you are certainly not privy to all of the machinations within whatever entity that you're looking to buy into as that candidate. So I'm trying to keep specific budget questions and that sort of thing to a minimum. However, we have a CRA in Chipley. At some point, we have to have a starting point for downtown Chipley. What are your thoughts on downtown as it pertains? Forget about the CRA. I like to portray all the way to the interstate as downtown Chipley, and I think that at some point in time, from a marketing point of view, we really need to embrace that, because whether it's West Point Home or One South Bank that are farther south, or whether they are something that's north of the city, anything along that 77 corridor or that 90 corridor, which are those commercial areas, should certainly be branded or have an imaging that includes that downtown, historic downtown Chipley. We have such a great history. We have a great opportunity for that with the train museum and all of that. I want to get into the Amtrak part of it in here in a second, but as far as the downtown Chipley is concerned, what are their biggest challenges right now, and what can you as a city council person look at going forward to improve anything to do with downtown Chipley?
And just looking at the downtown area, I think some of the challenges that they face, we have buildings that are owned, locally owned by individuals here within the city, and I believe that the infrastructure, the cost to bring them up to code is an issue. And then what type of businesses will we attract there, because we have several vacant buildings there in what we have deemed as downtown, but really I agree, downtown is that entire corridor from I-10 77 up north of Chipley, but we've just kind of quoted a certain section of Chipley as being downtown Chipley. But there's some challenges there. Is who will we attract, and once you attract those, what are the costs that's associated with bringing those buildings to up to code, and also make it attractive for the downtown area. I think we need to look at some more opportunities in reference to our downtown area, how a visual of what we want our downtown area to look like, and I think we need to think a little bit more so outside the box.
You mentioned that some storefronts are vacant now.
Yes.
For the last 20 years, 25 years, it's sort of been cyclical. It's come and gone. When we were riding that crest, that wave of prosperity before the big bubble burst, there was a lot of construction, a lot of business going on. We know that that was built on a false premise, that couldn't maintain itself, and that self-leveling, which it was the bubble burst. Everybody looks at the bubble burst and say, man, that was a terrible thing. It was the best thing that could have happened. Every day that went by without that happening meant it was going to be more painful to get back to where we needed to be. We were located in the Dunn building, which is right next door to the Mongovan building, for 7 years. We were upstairs, we were downstairs, we were in several different suites within that building, and it does share a common wall, with the Mongovan building. That building right now is totally vacant, and there are 6 or 7 different offices within that, rentable spaces.
Yes.
I've spoken to several of the people that have moved out the most recently, and they point out the fact that pieces of the Mongovan building falling off onto their roof if they're adjacent to it. It's almost unsafe to park on the alleyway side of the Dunn building because, again, of that stuff falling off. What do you see as your charge as a city council person going in to alleviate the issue which has become that Mongovan eyesore?
I believe that the city council right now are working on that. There's some legal issues with that, and they're working on resolving the issue with the Mongovan building. There's parking issues, of course. There's things that we have to look at. If we're going to create that type of downtown area, then we have to also create parking, because that's very much limited as well. And so I don't know what the end-all solution's going to be, but I think we need to work very diligently with the CRA, with whomever, to be able to decide and come up with a plan of action for that specific area. And maybe we don't have 30 or 40 buildings available there, but have 15 or 20 that are occupied and available and represent what we're looking for that particular area, then I think that's a win-win as well.
I would like to think that greater minds than yours and mine have been and are working on that situation. Right. And in all fairness, I understand that there are legal trusts involved and all sorts of extenuating circumstances. However, at the end of the day, the guy that owns the Dunn building is not having a penny of revenue. Matter of fact, he's continually got more damage to his building with no recourse. Mm-hmm. It's a bad situation.
Very bad.
It's been if it's not been legally condemned, it's been not used for the last 10 or 12 years. So obviously, one of those things that I'd like to think you're going to get questions about yes. going into this position as a city council person. We have recently talked about Amtrak, about the revival of Amtrak. I understand that there's an agenda behind that. Totally false. It's built on whims and prayers, and it can't happen fiscally, not responsibly. What are your thoughts about that?
I was there for the celebration that we had last year. I think it was 2016, maybe in the fall of last year. And Amtrak is just another option for travel. It provides that, but I know that there's going to be some work cut out in order to restore that. But from my standpoint, when Amtrak first passed through Chipley, I saw many of our citizens utilize that service. And for that service, and I understand that service went away, but to revive it, I think will be excellent here through our area.
That was before I moved to Chipley, before I moved to Washington County. So what use were they making of Amtrak from Chipley to where?
Jacksonville.
Okay.
I believe it was Chipley to Jacksonville.
Did it actually stop in Mariana?
It stopped in Chipley for sure.
Yeah.
There might have been a site there in Mariana, but I remember that the
but
stop.
Possibly nonstop from Chipley to Jacksonville.
I'm not sure if it was nonstop.
Yeah.
Tallahassee might have been an option as far as a midpoint.
I know it went all the way up the seacoast, the eastern seaboard, and went all the way to Washington, D.C., or not necessarily that same train, but you mm-hmm. could take that rail all the way. It was kind of a cool vacation, kind of mm-hmm. a cool, if you want to get away for a few days. It was something, one of those things on our bucket list we never did, and then it was too late.
Yes.
So it would be kind of cool for that to come back. Also, something that Chipley is known for. The train is used as the logo for the city of Chipley. Has
yes.
been for a lot of years. I don't know if it's still used today, but at one time it was used.
Yes.
You, as a freshman city council person, really have an advantage because, at least today, you can say, I don't know, to a lot of questions. And that's fair because nobody is going to know until they get into that seat. However, I'm sure that you've at least thought about what your hopes, dreams, and aspirations for Chipley are, being a longtime resident and child of Chipley. What do you see as some of the major issues facing Chipley going forward into the next 10 years, or even looking forward to farther than that, the next 50 years?
Being here from Chipley, and right now there's many concerns that I hear we don't have enough entertainment for our children or for the youth here within the community. We need more for them to be able to access. And you can utilize local churches and you can utilize some recreational activities, but there needs to be more for them. And so I see in that arena that we need to begin to look a little bit more at what we can do. Community centers, if it's no more than a YMCA, a Boys and Girls Club, something that we can expand so that our youth will not be bored and that we'll have places and facilities available for them. I think that what we have in place as far as working with our Economic Development Council and with the infrastructure things that's taking place, that will have job creation. There's no doubt that there will be jobs and readily available for the people here. We just have to make sure that we're able to keep up with the time, what's going on, stay focused, and plan out and think outside the box.
Let's go from broad strokes to something a little more specific. And Granted, this is low-hanging fruit, and it's been a subject of discussion lately, so it's pertinent and an obvious subject for discussion. and that is the splash pads.
Yes.
Marietta has had a splash pad for quite some time. They just added a second one to their little park there at Madison Street. Wausau has recently secured a grant. I know there's a woman here in town who has been working, trying to work with the city. I know there have been some issues. To start with water, and let me back up just for a minute. There have been a lot of improvements in the city of Chipley that the ordinary person is not going to be aware of.
Right.
Within the stormwater system, within the potable water system, within the waste management theater. So at one time, I think that one of the city people told me that there was almost as much water leaking out of pipes as what was being billed. And that's what you would expect from an infrastructure that had this much age on it. I also know that over the past X number of years, there's been a huge move toward the grant process and replacement and installation of new potable water lines, sewer areas. So I get all that, and hats off to the city for doing a great job.
Right.
Sometimes a small municipal area like Chipley has a tough way to go because they can't hire a high-powered grant writer to compete for some of those grants that we're competing with larger areas in South Florida for, and there's only so much money to go around. It's also not free money. It's our taxpayers' money, so we expect some of that back in exchange. I say all that about water because one of the arguments in the splash pad argument is that, number one, you either have to treat the water that's being sprayed out and reuse it like you do a swimming pool, or you have to have some way in the way of stormwater runoff to get rid of that water. And then also there's the actual cost of the water, because somewhere along the line you have to have that water, which is not free. Again, nothing is free.
Nothing's free.
What is your take on that? Are you aware of this controversy about the splash pad? And I know Bonifay in the process, if they haven't already. No, actually, I think Bonifay's already got one, but or in the process of it.
In the process, I think.
What, if anything, do you know about that whole thing?
I've attended several council meetings where maybe this lady and someone else had brought up a concern about the splash pad.
You mean they've actually talked about this at city council meeting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's good because I didn't know it had even gotten to that level.
Yes. It's been discussed, and I think that the council took it under advisement. They were going to do some research on that to determine, if that's going to be effective here for our area. But I'm not sure what the holdup is on that. I haven't heard anything indifferent from that, but that was something that community citizens have raised the issue about twice. Is we need something, or several times I would say, we need something for our youth. And so I'm not sure of all the issues that would require us not to, especially when our neighboring communities are installing these systems and have proven success rates with them. The citizens are happy. I passed through the one there in Marietta, and I thought, that's amazing. I've turned around to go back to revisit it, just to watch several kids and their parents out there utilizing that service. And so I think it's something that we need to really reconsider. And whatever the issues are, maybe we need to check with our neighboring communities to see how they overcame that issue, or what were some of the things that they did differently that we're not doing, or some things that we're thinking is an issue. Maybe if we talk with some neighboring communities, maybe we can find out some answers.
Yeah, and no need to dwell in the minutia of why or why not this has not happened, but it just seems to be a poster child for comparison with other areas.
Yes.
And it seems like we get bogged down with very little effort at all. It seems like we should allow cooler minds to prevail, and sometimes if the certain same people are making all the same decisions, then maybe there is time for a change, which is why I applaud your effort to get in there and make some changes. Have you spoken to the woman who is the ramrod behind the splash pad? I
have not. That's been since sometime last year, and I was just there in attendance as always at the council meetings. But I will reach out.
Yeah,
I will reach out because that information is public information. I can get her name and information for the record and reach out to her.
On the other side of that coin, and I was playing devil's advocate when I started talking about why not splash pad, but it's really easy to get grant money.
Sure.
And forget the fact that you then have to maintain and bear the cost of operating whatever it is that you build with a grant. Right now, we're in dire need of a new ag center or some sort of an assembly area. Now that Blue Lake building is gone, there is really very few places that the civic groups, festivals and events can hold their happenings. Ag Center on its last legs right now. It's sort of bolted together. Heard lots of different reports. The Extension Service tells me that there's no danger. It's not a dangerous situation. However, there is a grant process in place, and they've already actually jumped over a couple of the first few hurdles, and they still have a few more to go. All that said, were we to build a convention center, which at one point was a point of contention in Washington County, there was a school of thought that said we needed to have a convention center, and if you build it, they will come, and we could then attract some of these larger events. The problem is if you build this and it's totally free with taxpayers' money through a grant, but you can't afford to hire somebody to cut the grass because your city budget is strapped, then that's not prudent either. So you certainly have your hands full going into this position. What do you see as one of the more rewarding parts of being able to serve as that city councilwoman?
I think the rewarding part of it is being the voice for the people, but continue to ask those critical questions. I understand resources and finding grants, but grants are out there and grants are available, and we should be doing our due diligence to get as many grants that we can get here within the city. If we foresee this being an issue with maintaining the lawn care service, then we need to be proactively working to help with that. And so we have got to do more seeking for grants to help us until we're able to help ourselves out a little bit more, so to speak.
In my estimation, this is me personally, I believe Chipley is one of the best places in the world. My wife and I live here on purpose. We don't live here because somebody gave us a house here or because we got dropped off here when we were hitchhiking and we can't get a ride. We moved here from the beaches 12 years ago to Washington County, and in the last 3 years to Chipley. We love it here. Not only is it conducive to our business, but it's a wonderful place to get away from. We have the best transportation system, arguably, in the southeast United States. You've got soon to be 2 4 lanes, 77 and 79. You've got 90, you've got 20, you've got I-10. You've got all of this great transportation system. You've got the rail for economic development. We're not far from a deep water seaport for economic development. So regardless of what stage in life you're in, if you're a young person, there are engineering firms. There is the Department of Transportation. There are schools that are offering jobs. We always will need more jobs, and hopefully it'll always be a critical situation. We never want to get to the point where there's enough jobs for the people we have here and we sit back on our laurels. Fewer people probably leave here automatically graduating high school than did 20 years ago, I'm hoping. I wasn't here 20 years ago. But hopefully there'll be fewer still in another 20 years down the road. When Blake Wilson took over as the Chipley High School athletic director and head football coach, he sat in the chair that you're in today. And I asked him, to what do you attribute the fact that we have so many stellar athletes, scholars, just downright good students come out of our school system here, specifically Chipley High School, not taking anything away from Vernon, we have the same thing there, but he was in that position in Chipley. To what do you attribute that? And he said, Paul, it's our sense of spirituality, it's our family unit, it's our sense of community, it's all of the things that you would expect in heartland America truly exist right here. We don't have Antifa parading down our streets and blocking the highways yet. We don't have a lot of the idiocy that we see elsewhere. People here are relatively sane, they are stable, they're the salt of the earth. They believe in a hard day's work for a reasonable day's pay, and they're not afraid to work. Would you agree with all that? I
agree. Strong work ethic, spirituality, and the sense of community here. A great place to raise your children. It's just your family. I consider this small community a family, just an umbrella of families that makes up this one big family.
And despite the fact that our local newspaper, along with the Freedom From Religion group here just recently in the last few years, fought the city about the manger scene that was on our front lawn at the city hall, our city fathers at the time refused to back down and said, no, come and get us if you don't like it. Hats off to them. Hopefully you'll be one of them soon. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate this wonderful opportunity.
You can tell by the tenor of my questions that you're going into a job that is not going to be easy. I know you probably considered all of that going in.
Yes.
I believe that Chipley is at a pivotal point in history. We have the whole world ahead of us, and it's up to us to take that step that's necessary to keep going. I think there's a lot not being done now that can be done, which hopefully is something we can say every day from now on.
Yes.
There's always something more, but hopefully you'll be that person that starts to make those changes. Our guest today has been Tracy Andrews, currently running for the Ward 3 seat for the city of Chipley. Hopefully we're going to hear from the incumbent in that seat against whom Tracy is running. At the end of the day, hopefully this series of videos makes you a more informed, educated voter. We ask that you get out there and you vote. More importantly, become educated. Don't vote from a low information point of view. Make sure that you know for whom you're voting and the reasons why you're voting, and hopefully you're going to make that right choice. We'll be right back.